Well, first of all, I want to thank Joe for that splendid and kind introduction, and more importantly, from the splendid and kind remarks he made. The remarks about the importance of this kind of conference never be, well, let me put it directly, as he said, perhaps I was prescient, unfortunately, about time of crisis, but in this time of crisis, nothing could be more important than bringing people together around the globe. This is not a crisis of one area. It's a crisis throughout the world. And it's incredibly important that we come together, learn together, share together, and work together. And these settings are precisely the way to move that forward. So thank you, Joe, and thank IAFOR for making this possible. So my conversation today with you will be about local engagement in creating the democratic civic university in a time of crisis. And this issue that has been mentioned is we are clearly in a period in which democracy is in crisis. The issues of authoritarianism growing and accelerating throughout the world, the attacks on science, knowledge, higher education, democracy itself, the idea of trust being worn away on institutions that are central to our society, and the growth and increase of racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia occurring all over the world, and increasing chasmatic inequalities. This is occurring all over. With the change in Hungary, there are some points to hope and development, but this is clearly powerful. And just this morning, I received an email, a text actually, with information about the V-Democracy report, which comes out in various times. And the title is Unraveling Democratic Societies. And there's a question mark. Hopefully that's not the case. And what it pointed to, though, that it's the lowest level of democratic development across societies since 1998. The U.S. and Europe is the lowest level in 50 years, that only 74% of the world are non-democratic authoritarian societies, with 7% fully democratic on that scale. It's an extraordinarily troubling situation. So there needs to be global discussions about that. And the key issue for this talk is, in fact, the issue of the university as the core, key, essential institution for democratic development. And the idea, things that are up here, we all know, we live it all the time, that there are new ideas and technologies developed at universities, that they are central agents and engines for growing global economies, local, national. They serve as anchor institutions in their communities. They tend to be the largest purchasers of goods and services. They tend to be largest holders of real estate next to the church. They're largest procurers they are of services. They represent perhaps in cities all over the world, a major, if not the major, destination point for both culture and arts and for technology and business. It's an extraordinary role. And I would argue most important is the last issue, that universities are central to democracy. William Rainey Harper, president of the University of Chicago, when he became president in the early period of his presidency, which began, I believe, in 1894, he, in fact, pointed increasingly to this fact that universities, he said, are essential to democracy. And his primary reason is universities, in spite of themselves, teach the teachers and the teachers' teachers in every field. We educate the educators. We are the institution that establishes the way we learn and what we learn about, and we educate the next generation. Nothing is more central to democratic life. Nothing is more significant in terms of the status and development of a society. And for these reasons, that is why higher education is always in the crosshairs of authoritarians and autocrats. The reason why the attacks that are occurring in the United States are in fact seen in different ways and formats all over the world, because we are essential to democracy, to people learning and sharing and developing together. And the issues of a crisis is occurring that comes externally to us, but also internally. So one of the things I would critique in the United States, and I would not say this about other countries around the world because I don't know it as well, but I would say in the United States there are two core, central, primary purposes of the university. And that is, and let me put it in the following way, which we have failed to do. We have failed to successfully advance these two primary things as we should be. And in fact, there are reasons for that, but in part, as I'll talk about, it's the development of what might be termed a neoliberal university that emphasizes economic success as the exclusive purpose is higher education. There has been a distortion factor, but our core purpose is our education first for democratic citizenship. The education of creative, caring, contributing democratic citizens of a democracy. Number one, and since I'm from the University of Pennsylvania, which Benjamin Franklin founded, and if you don't mention Franklin, they dock your pay, I have to say, provide a quote there, but it's also powerful. Franklin was the most, of all the founding fathers, probably the most oriented to a democratic education. We can discuss that at another time, but it's centrally significant to Franklin's whole makeup and approach. And he said the purpose of an education, a particular higher education, particularly education at what would become, was not yet the University of Pennsylvania. He said in 1749 was to develop in young people an inclination that's moral, joined with nobility that's intellectual, to serve mankind, human beings, one's country, friend, and family, and which ability to serve should be the great aim and end of all learning. Central point. The one secondary, but also primary. Secondary within those two, but primary among everything else, is the idea of advancing knowledge to improve the human condition. It is knowledge, not knowledge for its own sake. Universities were founded deeply, and I'll talk about this, but knowledge, in fact, to improve the world. And also at Penn, W.E.B. Du Bois, the extraordinary ethnographer, social scientist, African-American scholar, who did the most significant ethnography by an individual, the Philadelphia Negro, said in that work to serve, and he started the work to serve as a scientific basis of further study and of practical reform. Make the world better. Not scientific study for tenure, not scientific study to, in fact, become smarter than someone else, but for a public purpose. So those issues entail that crisis. And then the issue, just to touch on, since this is a global meeting, and to discuss at least what the United States context has been. So starting with colonial colleges, every colonial college, except for the University of Pennsylvania, which I've touched on, will touch on again, was founded with a public purpose. That purpose was the education of people within a certain religion. Harvard, the oldest institution, was founded for Congregationalist ministers, or in fact, individuals men who were religiously orthodox in Congregationalism. A second school, William and Mary. William and Mary was Anglican. Can say that about the issue of education for people in the Anglican Church. Then we look at Yale, which was Congregationalist, and then Presbyterian was next, which was Princeton, around the same time as Penn. I'll get back to Penn, and Penn always claims it was before Princeton, Princeton before Penn. I really don't care, so you can pick either order, but since I'm from Penn, you might as well say Penn. So Penn before Princeton, then Princeton, and Dartmouth was Congregationalist. Columbia was King's College. It's obvious. It was for religious purposes. What Franklin did was create the first institution in the world, probably, that was secular in terms of service. That's an extraordinary development. It prefigured what I'm going to be speaking about momentarily. And again, I'll run through this quickly. The land-grant institutions, the Morrill Act of 1862 in the United States that was supported by President Lincoln, that idea was, in fact, that there would be universities around the expanding western states that would educate individuals for citizenship, for farmers, for people, in fact, involved in military science. Clearly a public purpose. There were extraordinary difficulties with it in terms of how it dealt with native populations, but overall, very, very significant development, most famously stated by the Wisconsin Idea, University of Wisconsin, where it is stated that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. Crucial idea, serving and learning from the population. In fact, there's this other statement where someone was asked, why were the Midwestern states the leader of progressive reform? And the statement was, because it was the union of soil and seminar. It's a really powerful idea of the life of the farmer and the academic world coming together. And then we could look at historically black colleges and universities, which was the second moral act in effect, or the second act related to university development, which HBCUs had a very significant focus, a public focus, a focus not just on communities, a focus on providing opportunities for excluded, historically excluded, governmentally excluded population. And then urban research universities. And that's not often looked at because people stop with the moral act. But if you look, first urban university, not far from here, in the city of Baltimore, the first research university in the United States that was modeled in part, but not fully, after the Germanic model of universities was Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins University was founded very much out of the roots of development in Baltimore, where the statement of Daniel Coit Gilman, the president of Johns Hopkins, for the founding of Hopkins, accept more honesty in business, better learning in schools, and to, in fact, end misery in our communities. That's a public purpose as deep as it gets, and I won't go into this deeply, but just to note, Columbia University, the same orientation was developed at this period. The University of Pennsylvania, Penn's focus out of the Wharton School, perhaps peculiarly, was focused on the issue of working with local populations to improve those populations to advance the university. And most powerfully, University of Chicago, developed by tremendous largesse from the Rockefellers, led in a way by William Rainey Harper in a brilliant way, except not really openly democratic enough, called universities the messiah of democracy. And he said they should be in poor communities. So those purposes of public and, of course, community colleges and regional universities serving a similar functions of opening themselves up to populations that have been excluded, to provide opportunity. And then what I believe occurs, and I'll turn to the theme and bring it into practical activity, which Joe emphasized very importantly, not just talking up here, but how this can get converted. Types of universities. One, of course, is a traditional liberal arts college and university. Very important, very powerful. But in fact, in the current context and even before, it raises the issue of being enclosed to the world and having, in many ways, a more elitist orientation. It also is being pilloried by neoliberal university. The neoliberal entrepreneurial university, which is developed increasingly along the lines of saying the purpose of education for young people is exclusively, now this is important, but it's not exclusively for career and economic success. It is in which the university behaves as a corporate entity at its not only business function, but the way it functions as an institution. And what gets emphasized is, in fact, economic success, financial success, and positioning in terms of economic financial success. And think of what that does to young people who come in often idealistic and looking to change the world. What happens when this behavior is modeled? And what I would argue what's needed and is developing in meetings like this help create the possibility for is a democratic civic university in which the primary mission, at this time in particular, but actually related to at least United States history, advancing democracy democratically on campus, in the community, and across the wider society. In a variety of ways, that's easy. It's easy in the sense that it's what we say the what and why. The hard question is how to get it done. Now, I wish I could now tell you how to get it done and be sure it was both fully correct and you should follow it. And I'm going to say two things. It's a work in progress, and if you follow it, you won't get from here to there. You have to work out of your own environments, your own institutions, your own countries, your own resource base. And this is where I work out of the Netter Center for Community Partnerships. And there are three we were founded in 1992 as the first university-wide center encompassing the whole University of Pennsylvania with three primary foci, which I'll be discussing in a bit: academically based community service, university assisted community schools, and democratic anchor institutions. So academically based community service, that's core to what we do. What it does essentially is these are credit-bearing courses that the institution has. These are regular courses, but they integrate not just teaching and service and learning, but research. And a research is around the question of not just research, but research to solve problems of the world. Great research universities are problem-solving institutions. And the issue is we learn certainly from reflection, but we learn from reflection and when we do things to make things better. That we do things to make things better helps us, but most importantly, we learn through helping improve things for the lives of people in our neighborhood, in our communities. And the idea of this is to focus on universal problems like poverty, inadequate health care, poor schooling, degraded environments. They're universal. They're not just Philadelphia, West Philadelphia problems. They're universal all over the world, but they're manifested at home. And I imagine in most of the universities that you all are members of, those problems exist, if not on your border, as they do at the University of Pennsylvania, not very far away. These are not parochial. These are profoundly significant problems that appear, that manifest in the environment. And the idea here is this is designed to do two major things: improve learning on campus, but also to improve the community itself. And the driver is helping to improve that community. And very important, to realize Benjamin Franklin's mission for students to become active, contributing citizens of a democratic society. We started with, in 1992, 4 courses, 100 students. We have a ways to go, but we have 1,800 students every year to 2,000 taking these courses, and 80 courses. But Penn is a really big institution. It's very powerful. We're not scratching the surface. We're just getting to move beyond the surface. So much more that should and could be done for the community and for Penn. And the next idea is university-assisted community school. This is our vehicle on how we bring about these changes and how we move things forward. And university-assisted community schools does exactly what's said there. Focus on school as the core institution. University is the lead partner of that activity. But let me describe this a bit. There's a history in the United States that this comes from. I'm a historian, and this is what I write about, so if I talk too long, raise your hand and tell me to stop. So university-assisted community schools come out of the community school movement. The community school movement came out of the idea of settlement house workers, of Jane Addams in Chicago, Lillian Wald in New York, standing for issues of saying they were doing work to help immigrant and poor communities. And they realized something. Out of Hull House in Chicago, they realized this Jane Addams clearly was the idea of saying, we can deliver services, but settlement houses that serve people with special houses in neighborhoods, they're scattered. Schools are everywhere. Schools are everywhere. They're throughout the country. They're places where we can really root this and bring it together. And this was their tremendous, tremendous finding. And then John Dewey wrote a very important essay, certainly to me, but I think in general, an essay he wrote in 1902 called The School is Social Center. And he said every school should be a neighborhood center. And we should bring services in to serve people. It should be open extended hours. We should educate adults. And you know what it's for? Primarily to build democracy. To build a democracy. What Dewey did not do were two things that university-assisted community schools and the community school movement also does. But what Dewey did not do is connect his brilliant ideas of pedagogy, the idea that we learn best from solving real problems and reflecting on it. He never connected that to community schools. And that's what's happened increasingly around the country. But what he also recognized, but they did not follow, community schools, schools that are community centers need more resources, and he did not look at universities at all. He was brought to Chicago by William Rainey Harper, who I mentioned. Harper looked to universities. Dewey did not. They clashed, and Dewey went to Columbia because Harper was president. But the issue is that what occurred for Dewey was you need a partner, and no partner can have the extent of resources and support that a university can, because it's part of what we do. We are part of the schooling system, and it improves what we do. It improves our learning, our research. We are not separate from schooling. If you ask faculty what's the easiest place to work for them, 9 times out of 10, Certainly in fields, let's not take professional schools, take social science. What we have found is take humanities, take sciences, it's a school. Why? We all went to school. We're all involved in education. That doesn't mean we don't work with other entities. Netter Center does with communities of faith, with social service agencies, but schools is the hub and the powerful impact of the multiple things you can do. And these are an example of the programs, from nutrition to anti-violence, arts, culture, humanities, sciences, job training, evening programs, sports. The idea is that the school can become an integrated hub. If we look at the communities that are these communities that are facing difficulties, there is no single vector. There is no single intervention. There is no single approach that can solve the problem. Only thing that can matter is bringing different approaches, different fields, different disciplines, and the voice of the community with the voice of the university together in a place. In a place. There's no magic bullet, and there certainly ain't no single magic bullet. So community schools could do that, and currently we have, I believe, 6 in West Philadelphia with 3,000 students and family members, and we bring those 1,800 undergraduates and graduate students and about another 900 volunteers and work study students who get paid to do this work in communities as part of their education, and academic interns, so about 2,700 students working with 3,000 children in the community in an integrated way to make a difference. To make it clear, we have a long way to go, but this is how it started. The third theme is democratic anchor institutions. You know, universities aren't just intellectual institutions. That's their core. That's the mission that has to be central. But in fact, there are institutional resources. As I said, largest employer, often the largest procurer of goods and services, second largest landholder, tremendous cultural and technology centers, the idea of bringing those resources all together to work democratically with communities. So we have a very extensive program with the athletic department of the university, a program called Young Quakers. Quakers is the model for Penn. It's kind of the mascot. The truth is that Penn was never a Quaker school. But if you say that at Penn, they get angry at you. So I only say it when I'm on the road. And it was never a Quaker school, but we are the Quakers. And we have a Young Quakers program that are taught by D1 athletes out of a number of teams. And they work with 3rd and 5th graders in that sport and help mentor them. And we have programs with older youth who are involved in sports also in the same way, working with other athletes around the University of Pennsylvania. And below, we have job training programs where people are getting certificates to work at the health center, to work in areas related to the university. Penn is the largest single employer in the entire state of Pennsylvania other than Walmart. Just think of the jobs that could be provided. So I want to make this clear. Penn may be seen as taking some leading role. We have miles and miles and miles and miles and miles to go before we sleep. Miles to go before we sleep. But those are the idea of integration. And then what we've also attempted to do with this work and worked hard to move this forward is to have this work take on a focus where no single university or program can do this alone. No single program or university can do this alone. This is an enormously difficult problem. We'll talk about this concept a little later. John Dewey had this idea in a book called The Public and Its Problems that what the world needed was the creation of democratic community, democratic neighborly communities in the neighborhood. The idea that democracy was based on people working together in neighborhoods. And this was written in 1927. So that's 99 years ago. And he said to himself in the book, why is this not happening? Why don't we have democratic neighborly community? This is needed all over the world. It's needed all over the world today more than ever. He said, why isn't it happening? He said, why? It's too hard. It's a very hard problem. And no one can solve this alone. You need to work with others, which is why meetings like this is so important. You need to share, learn, and mobilize. So there are a number of organizations that we've worked with. One is the University Assisted Community School Adaptation or Replication Work, in which we're fortunate to be able, we have resources to help other universities develop this work. And we're fortunate to have colleagues from Binghamton University here who are leaders in replication with the University of Pennsylvania. And one of the centers that the Netter Center had funded, I guess 2 sessions ago, 2 times ago. Every third year, we funded somebody. And they were funded like 9 years ago. Is that right? Or 6? I'm not good at math. It doesn't matter. They were funded, and after that, we funded the state of North Carolina, a number of universities, Duke was part of it, East Carolina State, and North Carolina Central. And they came together. And there were extraordinary results, and we learn from Binghamton all the time. The idea is there's no Rome. There's no one center. There are multiple centers that learn and share, and we have currently, the numbers are up so I can get them right, but I understand from my colleague Corey Bowman, who heads our replication work, that we are up to about now 300 higher eds, 1,400 university members, expansion as an idea of creating a national both movement and a way that both, and I want to make this clear, enhances the school, the community, and the university. And that's crucial. This work isn't charity. It is connected to the core academic purposes of the institution. And the other programs, just to cite them, is the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development, 25 higher education institutions. I was a founder of that in 1987-88, and the reason was that the universities were fighting in the city of Philadelphia about who would get money from the governor, and the governor essentially said, if you guys don't hang out, we ain't giving you any money. So we brought together some leadership, and they work on this neighborhood work. Another group that I helped form was when I was asked to chair a task force for the Secretary of HUD, at the time, Sean Donovan, under President Obama, and it brings institutions together, higher eds mostly, but medical institutions also, and libraries and cultural institutions along the line of that anchor institutions at universities and medical centers and libraries and cultural organizations should be democratic anchors. Not just be there, not just worry about economics, but democratic partners learning from and with the people in their environment. And the idea is, I think there are 4 principles, that the idea is place-based to the anchor institution, place-based work. The idea of goals, and the goals are equity and social justice. That these are crucial. It's not just doing this work, it's doing this work for a key purpose. That it's mutually transformative. It doesn't just change the university or the medical center, but changes the community. Mutuality. And at its heart, is it advances democracy and is based on democratic practice. Not just the goal of democracy, but working democratically. And finally, and this was referred to, is I chair an international consortium for higher education, civic responsibility, and democracy, which was formed in 1999 to work with the Council of Europe on the issue of democracy on campus, in the community, and wider society. Since that time, the International Association of Universities joined, and I think 2020, and before that in 2018, the Organization of American States. So we bring 35 countries from Latin America and North America together, 54 countries out of Europe. International Association of Universities has hundreds of members around the world. And the International Consortium, which I chair, involves the United States, the UK, Ireland, Australia, South Africa, the Magna Carta Observatory, come together and have global forums, do books, publications. We just had a global webinar to advance democracy, to advance it and learn together, share together, and work together on a global basis. You can't do these things just alone. So the local work needs to be seen as crucial and centrally based on local democratic practice for and with your communities, for and with. But that for and with for your community is a for and with another community, with another university, working along the same lines, working with their communities in ways that generate knowledge and mutual change and improvement. And then just to conclude, the highest level, as I see this work, combines 2 ideas of community. And these are two very important ideas in terms of, I believe, society, the world, and ways we might think about this work. Dewey, I mentioned this a bit ago, in 1927, said democracy must begin at home, and its home is the neighborly community. That really entails the idea that democracy is built on face-to-face human interaction, where human beings work together. They work collaboratively. They work cooperatively to solve the ongoing problems of life. Democratic neighborly community for Dewey was the key to a democratic society. It wasn't just government. It wasn't just voting. It was how people working together in ways that are open, participatory, democratic, to make the world better, to make their neighborhood better, to make their school better, to make their community better, to do it together and collaboratively. And Dr. King, taking a vision out of Reinhold Niebuhr and others and expanding it, had the idea of the end of this work is the creation of the beloved community. And for King, the beloved community is in which all people belong. They all live together in a space of equity, justice, peace, sisterhood, and brotherhood. This becomes the idea of what we work for, that and democracy. So the engagement that I argue for, the idea of that was discussed in the beginning, if I can go back to that heading, the idea of local engagement in creating the democratic civic university, that idea hinges on the notion of university community engagement through university-assisted community schools as one means, as a way to realize, not in just proclamation, but in practice, John Dewey and Martin Luther King's related visions of the neighborly community and the beloved community. In my judgment, realizing these powerful, humane visions, these powerful, humane, and just visions, these powerful, humane, just, and democratic missions should well serve as a high priority, perhaps the highest priority, perhaps the superordinate goal for our work in universities, at home and around the world, that this should be perhaps the highest priority for our work with our neighbors in order to achieve the visions that are both aspirational and doable if we work together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So I think I don't know if I was still supposed to have questions for a while. I got that right. Okay. All right. So question, critiques, strong disagreements, friendly amendments, anything you'd wish.
Anyone has any questions?
Yes. And I'm going to say who you are so people can get to know others.
Hi, Ira. It's Donald from Binghamton University. And I thank you for this. And I think if you polled people in this room, all of us, or 90% of us or more, would agree with you. But the vast majority of Americans would not agree with you. And I guess that's the question, is how do you bridge what we see as the legitimate purpose of the university in creating, nurturing democracy, and those who see it as the, as you said, the engine for economic or...
That's a wonderful question. So Donald's question, I think, it gets at the central question, which is always the question of how do you get this done? So, that's the question. And so let me at least provide some general thinking about that notion, about how to do it. I think one thing is that we have a responsibility to do and raise up this work as primary. I just was at a session at our own university where we had a provost distinguished lecturer who happens to be a former student of mine coming back, Salamisha Tillett, and she talked about how the necessity, and she's a Pulitzer Prize winner, has done these great things, is that this has to become the story, a story. And we have to work hard and I know leading administrators do this, but it's also getting the faculty to do this and building more infrastructure where this is something we do and do more of. And we make it clear that this is what we're about. Build those partnerships, not just talk about them, but keep growing them in such a way that when they ask what the story is about of your university, this becomes one of the answers. Our current provost has made that clear, that he sees going forward for Penn as an institution, given that we have been in the crosshairs early on of the Trump's attack on universities, that the way to do it is prove in practice what we are producing with our communities who will then stand with us, and making it clear that this is an engine and an approach for societal, community, and institutional advancement. It's the same question, Donald, you can ask me, what happens next? That really is all of us sharing and doing it in our own universities and figuring out how we do it together. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Ari Nikki Toby. I just really want to thank you because you gave me confidence. So I introduced a pedagogy. It's called socio-judicial pedagogy. I got it from my theory during my dissertation. Mm-hmm. And at the end, my presentation, I just opened it and I showed to him, I'm like, this is unbelievable. So I'm really giving you a hug. I hope you're a contact person. Because I did right there, I said, incorporating civic education and communal responsibilities. I stated that, it's part of my pedagogy, and I wasn't confident to talk about it. I said, this is probably won't fly. So when you were teaching, it just gave me that confidence to say, and I'm putting a slide on your presentation, in my presentation on Saturday. Right. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and I think that idea that this work helps generate a sense of confidence, and I guess riffing on what you said, confidence and purpose, I think is very powerful, so thank you for that. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for this great presentation. My name is Queen Ogbomo from Tennessee Tech in Tennessee. This is all good. We have the ideas. I've talked to different universities of how we can do this, but then all the source of funding is cut off by our great president. So how do we get there without funding?
So if I understand the question, how do you get there?
How do we get put up? Because all of this needs resources.
Right. How do you get the resources?
Where do we get the resources? Where do we get the funding when all the sources of funding has been cut off?
That's a big question. So among other things, I think that it needs to be, this is a simple answer, I'll get more complicated in a second. It needs to be a realization that doing good is a way to get resources for institutions. In other words, part of the strategy that I was alluding to in my response to Donald is the idea that this is an institutional advancement strategy, and part of it is a way to get resources is to make it clear you're standing and doing for these things. So one way of getting resources is, I'll tell you what a colleague of mine said. He said, altruism pays better than any other money-grubbing strategy. Now, that's very cynical, but in part it's true. It helps. It helps, but I'll get more precise. The precise answer is partly we need to build the constituencies who will support the getting of resources. And that means doing this kind of work is a way of getting others to support your getting funds. I'll just tell one quick vignette. We started this work in the 80s. Our first grant that went to us was 1989. We had gotten all these other grants of helping the community and doing things. And we were very careful not to lead with it. But even at that period, after we had done some fairly strong things, we were visible, there was a whole set of discussion. There was opposition to that question. Over time now, we have community leadership and others who, not necessarily for the entire university, but for Netter Center, will stand for us, advocate, and push for us to get money locally with politicians throughout the Commonwealth or state of Pennsylvania and nationally to get funds. So part of it is the work helps do it, but doing the work also is a strategy to get other people to support you. Okay? And I don't have a hard answer for that because each place has to keep working at it. Okay.
Oh, Hello, thank you for your presentation. This is Margot Conrativa from Canada. I like your quotation about the university develop knowledge to improve human condition. Great quotation, well said. But my question is, do you have any comments on what happens in the reality? When knowledge are developed in university, who decides how they are used? And how often it happens that they are used not to improve human condition, but the opposite way? And who decides what is to improve human condition?
So I think there are two parts to the question.
Thank you.
One part is, I think if I understood it, who makes the determination of what might be done to improve the human condition, and how do you judge whether it's really helping the human condition or not, right? So I think there are a few things. Since universities, as they say, are loosely coupled organizations, meaning there's not hard management, one issue of how this develops is through the process of partnership itself. Who determines it is working with the communities, working with the people. That relationships matter more than the actual end of a project. So part of what determines what's good are the people with whom you work. It's more important to do things with people and for them than to get the project done. That, in a sense, the people we work with aren't means to an end. They're not means to a grant. They're not means to tenure. They're not means to getting famous. They are ends in themselves. And therefore, they are part of that conversation and help determine what's for the good. Now, the judging is a profoundly difficult question, because you could short-term do wonderful things briefly and have great results in studies, and it doesn't add to kind of transformative impacts. So what I would argue for that is it means ongoing evaluation that looks as much at process as it does at product, and that those ongoing evaluations are not, yes, you've done it, no, you haven't done it, yes, no, I've lived through that much of my life. Instead, the approach is that the evaluation is an attempt to have continuous course improvement and correction. And those evaluations involve not just outside or inside evaluators, who in some projects I've done around the world have been literally a kiss of death to those projects, but it's the evaluation of the very community members. And one judgment if you're doing good, and let me put it this way, one judgment if you're doing well also, but first doing good. A judgment that you're doing good but doing well that's also helping, but primarily doing good. One judgment, are you still working together? Are you still working with those people? If you don't live to play another day, and none of it matters. It's a long time. It's going the distance. It's working over time. So one of the key tests, are those partnerships there? Are they growing? And is there a future for that? And will we be working together in the future? Another great question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please join me in
Thank you.
Thank you.